Please welcome Nika, Rebecca, Richard, Charlie, Josh, and Michaela. I'm going to ask you all to introduce yourselves, but please give our lovely panel a round of applause. Yeah. Okay, Michaela, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Oh, hi everyone. I think a few people here have already know who I am, but I'm behind this whole shindig tonight. So I'm the founder of Music Tech Fest, and great interest in seeing where we can take music industry next, especially in the area of where we can combine artists, their talent, the new technologies that this community is developing, and any associated brands.
Fantastic, thank you. Josh Saunders from EMI.
Yeah, so I'm Josh Saunders, Head of Technical Creative for EMI, so I do digital marketing production for the Parlophone and Virgin labels, so social media apps, mobile apps, websites, using APIs and the like.
Fantastic, thank you. Charlie, the CEO of Charlie Inc.
I'm a creative strategist and I bring bands and brands together.
Excellent. And Richard from Levels Management.
Hi, Richard Antwi from Levels Entertainment. We are a management company and a record label working with a range of artists, such as Retry 2. Jacob Banks is performing later in Daily.
Excellent, thank you. And Rebecca from EMI Records.
Yeah, I work in the commercial department. I'm mostly focusing on maximizing revenues with our digital partners. Primarily, I focus on maximizing revenue with Vivo and YouTube and advising on video strategy for the labels across Europe and rest of world.
Fantastic. And finally, last but not least, Nike Osterbach.
Oh, hey. I used to work for Atlantic and Island Records for 6 years doing digital marketing, social media applications and websites and all sorts of things. And now I started my own digital strategy company, focusing to work with managers to do it yourself, and also with the startups to kind of bridge the gap between artists, managers, and startups, if you like.
Excellent, thank you. So I'd like, if I may, to put the first question to Richard, because we spoke a bit earlier about how technology really and the whole explosion of really easily accessible, interesting, very usable, user-friendly music distribution technology has made it easier for you as a manager, and you've kind of done some interesting partnerships with SoundCloud. How do you think that the whole kind of technology revolution in music has made life easier and more interesting for people in management and people in bands?
I guess it's made it easier in a number of ways. The toughest thing is to get noticed and get your music, just get it, distributed out in front of people. As a manager, you're always, one of your key goals, one of your artist key goals, is to get a record deal. And labels are notoriously shy of signing any act that doesn't have real momentum, can't demonstrate a fan base, can't demonstrate people are interested. So our model has become to fund the recording of the album or the EP ourselves, release it directly, and whether that's via a download link in exchange for an email. We did it recently with Jacob Banks, where we gave away his EP initially for free, like snowboarding to Radio 1 taking notice and adding him to their playlist, and then that led to Jules Holland taking notice and him performing there, and now we've put his EP onto iTunes, and it's really been a catalyst. So new technology, it's amazing if you use it in the right way and you have the talent and, I guess, the resources to make it work for you.
Fantastic. So by embracing new technology and helping your acts reach the audience using these new platforms, you can have really tangible results, such as a spot on Jules Holland, such as kind of record label interest, etc. Cool. And Nika, I believe that you put together the campaign for Lika Lee with the Get Some free download. Now, when I saw that come out, I was quite surprised because this was like a headline single from an important artist on the label. But you were giving away the track for free. Tell us a bit about the results. Was that a strategy that worked? What was the ROI like in kind of embracing this free distribution in that way?
Well, it's kind of interesting because at the time when we decided to do that, basically we were playing the long-term game as being the management company that like we're going to give our best track out as a free sign-up track, so that we can increase our database number so that we can play the long game when the album is coming out. But then when the download became massively successful, so we got like 55,000 sign-ups from that track. And that's still the core of her fan base. But then again, like at the end of the day, when we became successful, then we got questions of like, well, we should have released this as a hit single rather than putting it as a free download. But like thinking of her career long term, that was definitely the right thing to do.
That's fantastic. So embrace new technology, but have the long view about your strategy. That's very important. Michaela, are startups the new rock and roll?
You're quoting me there, aren't you? Well, yeah, my idea is that the way that startups are handled by investors these days actually has some similarity to how bands used to be handled by managers. It's a cool group of talented people who have great ideas, they're doing something very creative. You go and invest in a whole bunch of them, and then you hope that one of them might actually sell out. So actually there's a lot of similarity there. And I think there are a lot of crossovers. I think startups themselves kind of, well, they tend to live together 24/7. They tend to tour together. They kind of think of themselves as a bit of a band as well. And they have to, because they kind of live out of each other's pockets. So it's a very interesting space, I think. It's an interesting comparison. So for that reason as well, there are similarities in how we manage bands and how we encourage startups, or how we sort of develop startups.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Josh, in your work as head of technical and creative over at EMI, do you kind of get given bands projects to work on that, you know, maybe there's a new signing and they're very keen to get involved in this technological platform or do a partnership with this app manufacturer? You know, do you see that the kind of acts are getting more involved in the management from your perspective?
Yeah, in some cases. A good one recently was Damon Albarn used, for a Gorillaz release, he used his iPad on the tour bus to basically create this whole side project record. And he was using a lot of Korg apps. So working with Korg, we made, using some of Jamie Hewlett's illustrations, we made an iPad version of the Korg app.
The K-oscillator?
As a synth, yeah.
Oh no, the Electribe, was it?
The Electribe, yeah.
Genius.
And that sold really well, and it went out at $20 originally, I think.
Yeah.
And did great numbers on that.
That's a great example of a very kind of significant partnership between a band and a kind of technology development house. Another one, which is a bit of a personal favorite, is the partnership between Alicia Keys and Native Instruments. I don't know if everyone's seen it, but there's basically a virtual keyboard available for contact, which is called Alicia's Keys. And if you play it, you sound just like Alicia's Keys. It's wonderful. It does what it says on the tin. It's actually a really good product. But Charlie Massey, you have put together some interesting partnerships between people like Richie Houghton, Burn Energy Drink. So that kind of carries on from, you know, how do you kind of fund this kind of crossover and this interconnection between tech and music? Tell us a bit about what you've been doing there.
I mean, sometimes it just comes from, you know, we work from the brand's behalf, and a lot of the time it comes from what the ambition of the brand is. For example, the thing that you mentioned, an energy drink, we were looking at talent and determination, and what we had realized was that a lot of the other energy drinks that were working in the same environment were creating passive relationships with, you know, you would turn up to a show and you would watch it. And actually what we work really closely with brands to try and help is to create access and opportunities for emerging talents to get to where you need to be. So whether it's helping our team, our consumers to make music by offering them free online music production systems that are cloud-based, so they don't need huge computers to work on, to then helping them work out the rights management when they're collaborating internationally in the way that we're helping, to then giving them access to people like Richie, their mentors, and giving them unique insights into how they produce things like the Plastic Man tour. But we're also, at the same time as doing that, we're also trying to explain and encourage them to understand that it's no good being talented in your bedroom. You have to also be able to promote yourself. And you know, we've talked often about whether the musicians that are most popular these days are the best marketeers. And there is certainly an element of that, and that's one thing that the brands do encourage, and we're so lucky these days with Facebook, as we were discussing earlier on, and other sort of social media channels. You know, you can influence more than just your face-to-face clique that you have. And so we work with all of those talents. And then there's always emerging and bubbling technologies that are appropriate at that time. e.g. Mixcloud, you know, they were perfect for us when we were looking at this a couple of years ago because they allowed us to promote people's music on a royalty-based scheme. That was the benefit for us at that point.
Yeah, excellent. I'm a big fan of Mixcloud personally. I absolutely love it as a platform.
Nihil is great. You know, they've just completely worked out what was a problem and made it very easy for everyone. You know, we talked about with Ministry earlier on. The big problem that they have is that they import a lot of rights. You know, with their compilations, and you get to a groundswell when you're streaming music where suddenly it becomes cost prohibitive for you to be successful.
Yeah. The whole rights issue is a whole.
It's never going to go away.
That's it. Yeah, I had a slightly frustrating experience on Track It Down recently, which is a kind of interesting website. It's all kind of good stuff for DJs, or whatever. I tried to buy a compilation, and all of the tracks I later found were unavailable in my country. You know, it's ridiculous. You know, so complex. Coming back to revenue and kind of getting revenue from platforms, Rebecca, you work a lot with Vivo and YouTube to kind of optimize the revenue streams, etc. Are these kind of very lucrative for the labels and the artists at the moment? How do you kind of manage that relationship?
Absolutely. I mean, Vivo and YouTube are our two music video partners, and they're definitely comparable compared to some of the smaller download stores or streaming services. It's really about bringing, YouTube is a really unique platform because it's a combination of the marketing and promo as well as monetizing and revenue in its own right. And I think a lot of people forget that a lot of the time. They think YouTube marketing so that we can push the CD, but being able to actually monetize the videos on their own, it's a very complex balancing act, sort of that's included in the marketing mix, but also promoting the downloads and streams as well as streaming the video on its own as well. So just sort of working with the labels, trying to get them to put in the correct tags and descriptions and the title, and you'd be surprised how effective that is in terms of boosting the ranking in search results for a video. It's just those kind of simple things that really can be effective, and especially for new artists as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the first companies to really do metadata properly, I think, was Consolidated Independent, which I think is, I noticed on your CV, is it? Or?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I worked there.
Great company, yeah. Fantastic. But, you know, on the other hand, these technology companies are being very open. They're generating money for the labels. They're cooperating. But, you know, are any kind of still acting as gatekeepers? We had Google launch its new music platform this week, which is quite an interesting development. Nikeda, what's your kind of opinion on the gatekeepers of technology and their relationship with the world of music?
Well, I find it really interesting. I mean, I'm interested in things that are obviously a bit more open because I represent a community that are interested in getting their hands on things. So basically things that are normally protected. So we have a few surprises for the hackers tomorrow morning, for instance, on that front, because we have managed to obtain stems from some major bands for them to hack with over the weekend and do whatever they want with. And this is, I believe, a first. So I encourage that approach, and I find it very interesting that from our community point of view, when we were evolving in, say, like in the 90s, Apple was the outsider, and we were very much fans of Apple. And the interesting thing that has happened, nobody wanted to touch Microsoft, and yet what happened recently is that Microsoft opened the Kinect platform to developers, and suddenly Microsoft has become the brand of choice for the alternative crowd. Something that I never expected, and if you'd asked me in the 90s, I would have said, never, this is never going to happen. So I think when a large technology brand shows that they are willing to open the gates, they get a huge following, and they enable really great things to happen. So I'm all for that approach.
Absolutely, and Nika, you put together this great kind of partnership between Viclone and Ed Sheeran recently. Can you tell us a bit about that and other projects you've been working on in that field?
The Viclone partnership came from meeting up with the guys from Viclone and then trying to find a suitable act to launch kind of a fan engagement campaign. And this was for Ed Sheeran actually, and for his single "Give Me Love." What I wanted to do is do the video as the official music video. So actually source content using Viclone. But then, like, due to, like, the official video already being in the pipeline, we ended up doing it as the official live video. But like, so what we did is, like, over 5 nights at Hammersmith Apollo, we asked the fans to film using Viclone or any other means content for the live video. And then after the 5 nights, we asked the kind of global fan base to contribute using Viclone by holding up lyrics and that sort of things. And the budget for the campaign was £500, and we got 220,000 views in the first 24 hours. But like, obviously there are other things, like, we had a big fan base to promote the video too, but still, like, that's a good example. Like, if you have a good fan base, if you have a big fan base and an engaging fan base, you don't need to spend like £25,000 on a video. You can spend £1,000, which is do it yourself almost.
That's an outstanding result. But Ed Sheeran has always had that very kind of close relationship with his fans via digital channels. I think he's always kind of done it really well, or the team behind him have always done it really well.
Like, he, in my opinion, like, he didn't need a label, but still he decided to sign with Atlantic Records.
Yeah.
And the benefits, I think, for him is that, like, he's had the global channels from Warner Music being like a global priority for the label.
Yeah.
So it has definitely worked for his career, thinking from a global point of view. Yeah. But then from the point of view of, like, owning his own masters and being like master of his own, destiny, like, then I think he made a decision there. Yeah. And it's really paid off for him.
Yeah, excellent. That's an awesome result. £500. Wow. Richard, in your opinion, what problem do you think tech companies are addressing? I mean, you spoke about using SoundCloud to kind of get the music out there. Are there other kind of roadblocks within the music industry or within the landscape of the music business that certain tech companies help get through?
I guess that the major one, I used to be a music lawyer, and by the time I joined the industry, the money had dried up. It was harder to find clients, etc. So it's kind of a generation of music lawyers who used to go out and find acts themselves, develop acts in some cases, and then broker record deals, etc. And that's very much how I came, or that's how I came through. And MySpace was my best friend. It was Jack Peñate, Adele. There was a whole generation of artists that we worked with, and it was all MySpace at the time. But interestingly, as those mediums became more popular, you get this influx of, I guess, new artists, and then it's harder to decipher who was actually good. It was a gift and a curse in a lot of ways. So yeah, I think technology in that way, in terms of being an avenue for finding talent, MySpace was key. Now it's YouTube very much. People always look, check YouTube numbers. SoundCloud's very much risen in prominence. Well, I guess a problem I'd love to see addressed in some way or dealt with is, as an independent label, radio's key. Radio still carries the biggest sway in terms of selling records. But there are only a few big major networks in the country. Those decisions are made by a few people. And we've been fortunate. I believe if you make good music, it speaks to people. People understand it, and they'll like it. And we've had a great run. But I see lots of talent that doesn't get any shine, doesn't break through. And I love to see technology address that and deal with that in some way.
That's a really good point. So kind of technology to bring attention to new bands that are trying to break through.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an interesting point. There is a lot of noise. There's a lot of people making music. You can, anyone here can record a piece of music on GarageBand, get it on YouTube, promote it, etc. How do we find out where the kind of new cool music is? What are the interesting technology filters that we're all kind of coming across to help promote good new music? That question too, Josh.
I don't think anyone's quite licked it yet. I think there's some interesting moves. Discover, I believe they're an Australian startup spelled VR. They've got quite a nice, it's actually something we did a couple of years ago, like a node garden interface where one thing opens and leads to another. That was using the Last FM API. But you select an artist and then it gets affinities with the community, and then you can basically, it's like a trajectory of, it's hard to describe, but check it out if you haven't already. Discover VR. And Last FM, I suppose, was probably one of the first of the startups that really got in there. I suppose with them, they came up with an API where people worked out how to monetize it better than they did, which I think is, I suppose, which is what which other companies are now looking at, and I suppose working out better with their APIs. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a bit of a question there about, what the record labels are doing with APIs. They are traditionally, walled gardens of content by their nature because of the rights, etc. Are we starting to see more flexibility in terms of labels opening up APIs or releasing content to app developers in this field? Michaela, have you seen?
Well, I believe OpenEMI here.
OpenEMI was here first last year. So that was the first of the big labels that.
So that's a partnership that we did with Econest, and Econest provide the fundamental kind of Swiss Army knife technology, but there's a deal framework around it. The flagship product for that at the minute is probably Bluna app, made by a company called Groovebug in Chicago, which is a subscription-based app for discovering jazz, and that was made using the OpenEMI framework, which is you sign up, you get a key. The sandboxes that we have include things like Gorillaz and Professor Green and Tiny Temper, and it's not all just music. So that's definitely, it's the long game. So we have to with this stuff, but there's some really interesting stuff coming out of it.
Yeah, that's some really interesting kind of innovation coming from EMI there. Rebecca, do you think that if a major label is kind of more openly and publicly embracing new technology and open APIs and stuff like this, will that make it the more attractive to bands who want to sign? The fact that these labels do have the kind of fingers in all these different technology pies, to use a terrible metaphor. Do you think that is a consideration for bands who want to sign to labels? How much they're pushing their stuff on YouTube, on Vivo? Is there that kind of awareness of the new technology yet?
I think artists and bands are still really nostalgic about getting signed to a major label, so I don't think that really has a huge impact. I mean, I know that our last few new signings in the UK, like Gabrielle Aplin and Connor Maynard, they were both YouTube artists before they were signed. They built up their fan base on YouTube, and so when they first signed with EMI, we had a very careful plan of moving them over to Vivo, because that's really the cream of where they are basically rise as stars. Vivo is a much more clear premium music video platform in order to get them more exposure, not just on YouTube or on Vivo, but across Europe and the world, really, giving them that, I guess, breaking through the noise, really, on YouTube.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. And Charlie, through your work kind of hooking up labels and artists and DJs and brands, do you think that there's a significant role for brand partnerships in the kind of new music industry to help cut across the noise of the kind of, the floor level of noise in terms of publicity? Can a brand kind of take an act and really push it through using new technology?
Well, I mean, a brand can bring many things. It can either bring access to a consumer base, a community that it wasn't familiar with before, or it can literally bring funds, the old age sponsorship model, or it can use its influence to create a network that can help to build a better stature for them. I mean, some of the work that we've also just been doing with Relentless and some artists that may be quite familiarly associated with Relentless, that's very much been dictated by the character, the personality, and their ambition. And what we've always said to brands is, if you first of all define what you want to be and what your objectives are, and then open yourself up to brands, to bands and to artists. We certainly found that with Sasha when we were working with him, that we told him what our long-term objectives, our aspirations were, and he bought into it because it was authentic. And I think that's one thing that we've been talking about, is authenticity too. If you're credible, consumers can smell that, musicians can smell it, and brands stink of it sometimes if they're not behaving in a credible and authentic fashion. And he bought into it and released the stems to one of his tracks, and we used it for a remix competition, and it was a great way for people to get hands on toys that they wouldn't normally get. So I think for bands it's great, but also it opens up an opportunity that some money can't buy. It's access, isn't it?
If I can latch onto this, it's interesting because Daft Punk were doing an interview on the BBC Six Music, and while I was sort of dealing with legal things with Universal today to clear Jamie Cullum for tomorrow or something like that, sort of in a day, I was listening to it in the background, and they were saying how interesting it is that they went sort of retro, as I would call it, they didn't use that word, because they felt that with this layers and layers of production and technology, that the personality of the artist is sort of buried underneath those layers. And I thought it was a very interesting quote from them, and I think it's probably raises some questions in this space as well. I don't know if...
I think absolutely. I mean, the tendency to overproduce a record or to kind of layer stuff with technology and throw stuff in, I guess that's like age-old production problem. But it is interesting listening to what Daft Punk have done, listening to what Pharrell's doing. A lot of people are stripping tracks back and making things simpler in terms of what they bring to the production. I think if you look historically, there was a moment where, synthesizers came in, laptops came in, computers came in, and everyone went a bit production crazy. But particularly if you've been listening to hip hop in the last 5 years, if you listen to what Drake's been doing, The Weeknd's been doing, all those guys, minimal stripped back production, and in its own way, it's cutting through. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what you feel, but often with adopting technologies, there's a groundswell, everyone rushes, and then you feel the tide comes out, and what's significant and useful remains. Absolutely. Everything else you forget about.
Yeah, there's a great quote from Brian Eno recently. Happy 65th birthday, Brian, from all of us. He said, "Isn't it interesting that in the second decade of the 21st century, much of the most interesting music has been made on analog instruments?" Which kind of comes back to your point, it is going to strip down. It's Daft Punk have literally said about their new album, they didn't want it to be made on laptops. They've never gone that way. They'll have an SB1200 and the old school stuff.
But that's what we found with Audio Tool. That was what everybody loved about it, was that they had access to analog equipment in a digital environment. Yeah. They wanted that analog sound.
Yeah. But I would also add to that. Sorry, jump into your question again. But something that we encourage the hackers to do here is make instruments with anything they can find. And something that I'm going to throw big words at it now, but I'm into democratization of music in the sense that I don't want to be relying on having rich parents who can buy me a piano. If I'm creative enough, if I'm a kid who's creative enough these days, I can get my hands on some sensors, I can get my hands on some transducers, whatever. I mean, it's all terribly, terribly cheap stuff. Pick up any old thing and just make an instrument out of it. Now, this is something that's now available to everyone, and it can be very lo-fi, it can be very low-tech, but it can be extremely creative. So I think that we have a space that can open up now to all these kids out there, as long as they have a little bit of know-how about how to put, a bit of circuit bending, bit of tinkering, and well, let's see what happens this weekend. Anyway, I think we're going to see a few examples of that.
Excellent. One of many things that impressed me about Brian Eno is apparently his main studio instrument for like a decade or something was a Yamaha DX7 keyboard. He just knew how to use it so well. He could make it sing. So I love that approach. But with groundbreaking artists like Eno, releasing the really successful iPhone apps, and Bjork releasing her album as a series of apps. Nika, what do you think? Is there now a very definite role for interactivity in music releases, or is it kind of developing in tandem with the traditional music business of albums, etc.?
Well, I guess the whole question is, if you're an artist, what's your product? Is your product a live experience? Are you selling music? Are you selling apps? So, OK Go are more famous for their music videos than their music. So are they more Alex, what's his name, has a highly successful YouTube channel, which he lives from. So it's it depends what's your product. And with Brian Eno, what he did with the app is exactly an extension of what he's been doing like for the last 30 years. So that fits perfectly. For Björk, for example, in the Biophilia app, it's kind of from a sales point of view, probably less people bought and downloaded that app and actually heard the music or have an idea of what the music is that came from the app than many of her previous records. But like from a PR point of view, that Biophilia thing is something that's going to be she's going to be remembered for that.
Yeah.
And so as a PR exercise, brilliant. As a music, as a kind of, most Björk fans want to listen to Björk as a passive experience at the end of the day anyway.
Yeah.
It's a niche who want to create new remixes and all that sort of a thing. But it is still interesting, and people, artists have to be exploring these things, like that's all it's about. But like at the end of the day, artists and managers and labels are trying to figure out like, where's the money going to come from, and what's the product, and what are we actually trying to, do here?
Yeah, yeah, good point. Absolutely.
With Björk, it was not really with any label involvement. It was Björk working with Scott Snippy Studios, and as Nick has alluded to, the sales figures are somewhat elusive to Biophilia, even though as a body of work is incredibly impressive and obviously fits the DNA of the concept that Björk had. But that's why it didn't really kickstart anything. I'd like to think that it will eventually, but
And then also, if you think about like app as your kind of core product, or like Biophilia album, how innovative is going to Biophilia be musically in 10 years time from now? How innovative is debut, Björk's first album, like 15 years after its release? So that's also like, something that, people have to think about. Like, are old computer games as cool these days as like Neil Young's Harvest or something?
Yeah.
So like the technology has some like, music doesn't equal technology in all cases when it comes to creativity.
Yeah, that really puts it into perspective. Yeah, excellent point. Rebecca, just coming back to your work with the kind of distribution channels, do you think, you mentioned Conor Maynard was a YouTube artist before you signed him. Are artists really kind of embracing that, bi-directional aspect of communicating with fans, and, are all of them kind of embracing this openness and this communication, or some of them still like to maintain the mystique? Do you see any particular trends in how artists are interacting with the technology partners?
It's both. I mean, there's some artists that are like replying to fans' comments on their videos, or commenting on other artists' videos, for example. And then there's other artists that just don't even go near YouTube or talking to the fans other than maybe after a gig or something like that. So it's really divided. I'm always constantly advocating trying to get artists more involved in YouTube, because that's really one of the few platforms that we have that's cheap to talk directly to the fans, and also through a channel that we can monetize as well.
Yeah, excellent. I've just noticed the clock is kind of veering up towards just being a little bit after 9. So down to our last kind of questions. Would each of you like to name a favorite app or a favorite moment in music and technology of recent years, starting with your good self, Nika?
Well, that's a tough one. Biophilia is a good example from a PR point of view.
Yeah.
So music is marketing. Like, if you don't do good marketing, you're not going to be successful with your music. Yeah. So it is a good example.
Excellent. Lovely. Cheers. Rebecca?
Gosh, when Spotify launched, it's still, when Spotify launched, I got a beta invite at the end of 2008 before it actually launched, and first time I opened it, it was the feeling that I got when I was 16 and I downloaded Napster in 1999, so that still is a benchmark for me.
Awesome, yeah, agreed.
For me, I think it'll be Algorithm's DJ app. I swear by it. It's perfect for flights. I listen to all the demos. I guess with iTunes and Spotify, you can't actually play with the music. In that app, particularly on the iPad, I can get into the levels, EQ in it. I think it's just a perfect way to interact with a song.
Yeah, definitely.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's great. Charlie?
I think for its continual persistence, I think the way that Shazam has evolved, and we talk about quality and finding music, but trust your ears, you know, and okay, the music has to be playing for you to be able to hear it, but just watching, you know, my dad, like, I like this, suddenly he knows where to see, you know, you can go and see a band, and I just love the way it's completely connected up and made it much easier for you to do that, to see things live.
Yeah.
And
Fantastic.
purchase the tracks.
Indeed, good point. Yeah, thank you. Josh?
Mobile at gigs is, I think, going to be the main one to watch going forward. So recently with Swedish House Mafia, it's a technology, Sonic Notifier, which is what I call the dog whistle technology. It was essentially inaudible to human ear signal in the main track. So at the stadium in LA, they notified when people to hold their phones up, and when they did, the phones heard the inaudible signal and then played the video. Also, what Richie Hawtin and Plastic Man has done is very impressive, using Wi-Fi rigs at events, and I think that kind of two-way interaction with fans with using smartphones at gigs is going to be really important.
Yeah, good point. And finally, Michaela.
Well, the most jaw-dropping experience last week on hearing Jamie Cullum play the new Seaboard instrument, which the audiences here will see tomorrow afternoon. And the reason being that it opened up other areas of his talent that we're not usually exposed to. That means that it's not like they're not there. Clearly, these artists are phenomenal on all sorts of levels. And what I witnessed could be only described as sort of Aphex Twin with jazzy riffs, or Jean-Michel Jarre with soul. And there are little clips and bits, you will be able to see it tomorrow, but when someone develops a new interface to something that is effectively kind of another version of a synth, but because of its surface, because of the different way that the artist interfaces with it, it starts creating, well, it basically evolves the artist's creativity, and this is the junction of creativity and technology that I really love to see.
Fantastic. So what time is that tomorrow?
Tomorrow at 6 o'clock, we're introducing the video that's been filmed by Riff Raff Films, and there will be a live performance on the instrument as well.
Fantastic. So I hope some of you are going to join us here tomorrow at 6 o'clock. In the meantime, please put your hands together for our fantastic panel of experts. Thank you.